Right, well, good morning everyone and welcome to the Licensing Subcommittee this morning. I'm David Barker, I'm going to be chairing the subcommittee, and to my right are the members of the committee who will introduce themselves.
Morning, Councillor John Booker, Stocksbridge and Upper Don Ward.
Good morning, Barbara Masters, Councillor for Ecclesall.
And we also have a number of council officers working with us this morning. Would you like to introduce yourselves, please?
Morning, Samantha Bond, Legal Advisor to the Subcommittee.
Morning, Shimla Finch from Licensing Service.
Jay Bell, Democratic Services Officer.
And could I ask you to introduce yourselves, please, and if you could use the microphones in front of you, that would be helpful.
Jonathan Round, Environmental Protection Service.
Sean Gibbons, Environmental Health, Health and Safety, Responsible Authority for Public Safety. Sorry.
Catherine Jarvis, Police Licensing Officer for Sheffield.
Thank you. And as I'm sure you all know, we have a set process for these hearings, and I will now ask our legal advisor to outline that process.
Thank you, Chair. So in the absence of the notice giver this morning, we have, well, the Licensing Service have tried to contact them numerous times. We've not heard anything back, and I think it's the same from you guys, but I'll let you address the committee on that. So if it's all right with you, it makes sense if we start with you, Catherine, from Police Licensing, just to set out your representations in response to the notice, and then we'll work down, go to Sean, then John. Basically, just to respond to the notice, raise your concerns as detailed in the report, and just expand on those if there's anything further you have to put before the committee. Members and officers can ask you some questions, and basically, once we've done that, if you want to sum up, leave us with any final thoughts you can do, and we'll then go into private session to consider the notice and the representations and make a decision on that. So if you want to wait around, we can give you that verbally a little bit later on this morning. At any time during the hearing, members can request legal advice, so we can do that in open session as we are now, or private, where we'll just ask you guys to wait next door. We'll pause the recording and then we'll invite you back in, resume the recording and just feedback on what was said. It is a public meeting this morning that's also being recorded, live webcast, I'm never sure on the term. So it is open to the public and press, but if at any point we decide that it needs to be closed or held in private session, we'll deal with that as and when, but hopefully it should be relatively straightforward. And in the absence of a written procedure, I think I've covered everything, hopefully. If not, someone else can let me know, but that should be it. Thank you, Chair.
That certainly sounds a sensible procedure. So, Catherine, would you like to start us off?
Thank you. Morning, Chair, morning, councillors. So South Yorkshire Police are objecting to this temporary event notice under the three licensing objectives of prevention of crime and disorder, public safety and the protection of children from harm. Despite several attempts to contact the applicant, both via phone and email, we, like our colleagues, have unfortunately received no response. As a result, we've not been provided with any event management plans, security arrangements or details on how the applicant intends to keep the attendees safe. The notice describes the event as a live music event raising money for charity. However, there's no further detail on what that entails, whether it's open to all ages, how under 18s will be safeguarded if they're allowed to be in attendance, or how the event will be controlled. We also don't know what type of music acts will be performing, which raises further concerns. Certain genres can attract more challenging crowds, and without knowing the nature of the performances, it's difficult to assess the risks. Just for example, Sheffield recently saw an impromptu set by Ed Sheeran outside the town hall, which drew huge crowds and presented several public safety challenges, despite being unplanned and short in duration. The proposed location, Devonshire Green, that's an open public space situated in the heart of Sheffield city centre and forms part of the nighttime economy. The event is scheduled for a Friday evening when the area is already busy with bars, venues and high footfall. Without proper access control or supervision, there's a genuine risk that the event could attract significantly more people than anticipated, including individuals moving through the city centre for the nightlife, raising concerns around crowd management and the potential for disorder. There's a strong likelihood as well that attendees may bring their own alcohol, which could make the event difficult to monitor and manage safely, particularly in an open space without any clear boundaries or oversight. Furthermore, given the current national threat level, there is an expectation that organisers of public events will consider counter-terrorism and emergency planning measures. Again, no such information has been provided in the temporary event notice. Again, we've not been able to make contact to find out what provisions and whether that's even been a consideration. So, in summary, it's a very short one for me today. The applicant's not demonstrated how they're going to uphold the licence and objectives, especially in relation to the safeguarding, public safety and prevention of crime and disorder. For these reasons, South Yorkshire Police respectfully request that the subcommittee consider issuing a counter notice to prevent the event from taking place. That's my submission.
Do members have any questions for South Yorkshire Police on those representations?
Yeah, whether it's you or all three of you, I'm not too sure.
Specifically on those representations that we...
Yeah, no, I mean, sort of, I absolutely hear clearly, but sort of, I'm more concerned about if there are attempts for it to go ahead, you know, because we know social media, we know that people can't sort of just move in very short notice. Is there a strategy in place to nip it in the bud type of thing?
Well, from South Yorkshire Police's point of view, we will continue to try and get hold of the applicant between now and the event date, which is, I think, the 21st of November. So we've got some time to try and make contact to try and resolve that with the applicant. But that would be something that the city centre inspector and local policing team would put a plan together. But there isn't a plan at the moment. But if we don't get hold of anybody, then they will put a plan together on if everybody just starts turning up. But I'm not sure what that would be, because unfortunately I'm not a police officer, so I'm not sure how they would manage that. Sorry.
Yes, thank you for that. I'm reasonably experienced in putting these events on, and one thing that we always do is have bag checks around the perimeter. So obviously there's nothing being published about this at all, is there? So you talked about bringing alcohol in. That's the idea of checking bags, and we put that on the when we advertise online, that bags will be checked, and that does tend to stop people bringing anything that they shouldn't in, and obviously there's nothing like that. So and the perimeter and the security and this, I mean, I really don't see how this, as I see it now, I don't see how this can possibly be allowed to happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the concerns.
Asking for trouble, really.
I think that's one of the concerns, is there's no mention of any kind of perimeter of how they're going to manage their 499 attendees and how they're going to prevent anybody bringing weapons in or alcohol and things like that. So that's our concern as well.
I've just one question, and I'm going to ask it to all three of you separately, so two people can prepare for it. But it's simply, if the applicant had contacted you, would you have been able to provide them with some help and support in putting the event on?
Absolutely. I mean, we all sit on the safety advisory group for major events for the city centre. So we have experience with the planning procedures around safely running major events. So there's lots of guidance that Sean specifically has put together in conjunction with some of the other authorities that we could have provided. So there's a wealth of knowledge. We would have helped support them to put the event on in a safe way and providing the right advice and guidance, depending on what they came back with. Because again, it just, without the full information, we don't know how far we would need to go with that support, but it's definitely there.
Thank you. Sam, is there anything you'd like to ask? Then we move on to the next set of representations.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad that Catherine mentioned about the Safety Advisory Group, because that was going to be my opening point. On the, we're all very kind of experienced officers in dealing with events. It's all sizes and scales within Sheffield. So from, I've sent you some kind of disclosure notes in terms of explaining, you know, some of our remit, but we deal with events from a couple hundred people to 499, 100 temporary event notice, and we deal with the big events such as tramlines, Arctic Monkeys event, you know, capacities up to 40,000 people. So we're all very experienced at dealing in the event world. We've all got training in that world specifically. So I sent a disclosure about some of the typical type of conditions that we would put on for major events. And I've tried to, the reason for that disclosure was to just point out some of the discussions that we would have and some of the guidance that we would be looking to send out to anybody putting an event on. And as I've pointed out in that disclosure, we certainly, in terms of the scale of the event and the risk of the event, some of the risks for a smaller event still apply to those risks that are in place for a large event. So even though you know, I could argue there's only 499 people there, if some of the principal risk management's not in place, then that is a big risk. And I certainly have more concern sometimes about smaller events than the bigger events, because the bigger tram lines, Arctic Monkeys, the stuff that happens at Don Volleyball, we've got very seasoned professionals in place and the infrastructure's in place, safety management teams, etc. So it's really to draw upon the fact that we have tried to communicate with the person that put the temporary event notice in. And unfortunately, I think we as a collective, as an authority, have tried several times to contact the person and to engage, and there's been absolutely no engagement there. I think it's also fair to say that there's discussion from us as Sheffield City Council as the landowners on there, so we are the landlord and we've got to remember our liability there under the Occupiers Liability Act. And certainly that's discussions that would be ongoing with the event organisers and the council being the city centre management team. So really, I think Catherine really captured the key points. I've made a few brief notes. I'll just kind of go through those. I think you've covered everyone, Catherine, but just to make sure. So the main concerns for us is at the moment there's no event management plan, so no details on how the event can be managed safely. There's no details on the crowd management, how they'll be able to actually manage the people in and out of the space. The ground conditions is a big consideration, obviously. Facilities, we don't know what the regulated entertainments are going to be. Like we said, there can be different risks. We often use the example of Mrs. Miggins' tea party as opposed to a kind of rave type event. So and it could be in the same place for the same amount of people, but the risks are so different, and it depends on the crowd, it depends on the dynamics of the crowd, and we've got no information on what that is at the moment. There's no, obviously we've got concerns that there could be issues with hostile crowd management, and the experience of the event organiser. It's often when somebody's putting an event on, we'll want to find out what backing they've got behind them, what experience they've got, as to whether or not they can deliver that event safely. And I think, without kind of going on to repeat what Catherine said, I think generally we would work with the organisers. There's lots of events that take place in Sheffield throughout the year, and we take part in lots of discussions with event organisers, whether that be in a safety advisory group meeting, whether that be site inspections, actually attending the events. So we do like to engage. We do like to have events in Sheffield. It's not that we're opposed to events in Sheffield, but we want those events to be safe, and we want people to go and enjoy those and go home safely. So that's it from me, Chair and Councillors. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you. Do members have any questions?
Thank you. It's really a comment, because a couple of years ago there was an impromptu event in one of the local parks, very good-natured, arranged in innocence, small crowd, got a lot larger, attracted a very undesirable element. The police had to get involved, and what would have been a small, nicely contained unit became quite challenging and ended up with a stabbing, luckily not severe. So I do fully take on board your concerns about safety, and it was very open access. So I think you have my strong support in this to actually make sure they're arranged correctly. So thanks, but yeah.
Yes, I agree with that completely. It is our land, and if anything happened to anyone, we would obviously feel terrible about this and feel we've failed people. And being naive, the organiser, is not an asset to putting something like this on. It may be well-intentioned, but I'm afraid not answering questions on basic issues and putting something like this on, it's very important. To me, the access, anyone can wander in. You don't know what they're carrying. They could have alcohol on them or anything. It's a recipe for disaster, I think. Thank you.
And as you've answered my question already, I shall ask you another one. And it's simply, is this level of disengagement from the applicant usual? Are applicants usually keen to engage?
Generally speaking, yes, I would say. And my experience of working in the Safety Advisory Group, that engagement is normally very well appreciated, because we're also helping them to, a lot of the times that we deal with an event in a specific space, we might have dealt with another 50 events in that space. So it can also be the local, it can be the local knowledge that the officers have in the Safety Advisory Group that know about specific issues with that particular event space. So yeah, we normally get really 100%, I won't say 100%, but it's a very high positive engagement with event organisers.
Thank you. Sam, is there anything you'd like to ask?
Thank you. I'll ask you because it kind of covers more of the issues that you would deal with under the health and safety side of things. So licensing have included the premises licence that encompasses Devonshire Green in the pack. So potentially members might have the option to add some of those conditions onto the 10 if they were to acknowledge the notice and allow the event to go ahead. Do you think any of those conditions would allay the concerns raised in your representations?
I think that's a difficult one, given that we've had zero engagement with the applicant. I'm not saying that we can't work with the applicant to make sure the event can go ahead safely, but it's very difficult at the moment without any information whatsoever. As you appreciate, the information that's being put on the temporary event notices is minimal, so we've got absolutely no detail whatsoever at the moment. I think it's also fair to say that there's ongoing liaison with city centre management team about the actual use of the space itself. So again, I think the first thing they would need to do is to make sure that they've got full permissions to use the space. I'm not sure if anything's been addressed around that in terms of between the applicant and the city centre management team at the moment, but I think that was ongoing discussions.
Thank you. I think at my last knowledge it was still an ongoing discussion as to, I think they had separate concerns given the whole landowner situation. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
So, thank you. And as always, we save the best for last, so let's give us your representations, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think mine's quite simple, really. There was no control proposed to control the potential for causing public nuisance, and clearly live amplified music has a potential to unreasonably disturb the neighbours, both residential and commercial. Typically on an event like this, we'd expect to see a minimum of a noise management plan, how they're going to control the noise and what potential likely spillage off the site is like to be, and there's nothing to do with that. I mean, I think as we just touched on there, generally on Devonshire Green, with it being council land, I'd expect the event team to have been involved in it. There is, because like Sean said, there's been so many events on there, there is things that we could work to, but none of that's been submitted. There's been, nothing to control anything really. No. It's for an event that size in such a location. I mean, we'd be concerned if it was in a pub's back garden, but in the middle of town and on a Friday night, it's concerning.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? John?
I can see where this will end up. It'll social media. We wanted to put a charity event on for children in war, and the council said no. I can see, but obviously this is
yet to make a decision.
Well, exactly. If we come to that, but I can see exactly where this would be headed, depending on what decision was made. Unfairly, obviously, but that's how it goes. It's just a
Thank you. In the absence of any further questions, oh, sorry, Sam. Sam, you haven't got any questions. So, in the absence of any, do you have any questions? So, in the absence of any further questions, is there anything any of you would like to say in summing up?
Just simply that the applicant hasn't engaged with us or provided any event plans in the 16 days since the application was submitted. We've all made numerous attempts from multiple agencies, phone and email, so they've had every opportunity to respond and haven't. No details on safeguarding, crowd control or the type of music acts which could influence the nature of the crowd. Devonshire Green being a busy city centre location, again, without proper oversight, the event poses a risk to public safety, crime and disorder, and crucially, as I said before, no counter-terrorism or emergency planning measures have been included, despite expectations for public events of having those things in place. And again, for those reasons, we respectfully request a counter notice. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm quite happy with Catherine's summary on that, so I don't think I need to add any further to that.
Nothing further to add.
My microphone on. Ooh. Could, maybe I shouldn't have. Could we have the options then, please, Shimla?
Yes, thank you. The options are 1, to acknowledge the temporary events notice, allowing the event to go ahead on the proposed date as per the notice submitted, or 2, to acknowledge the temporary events notice, allowing the event to go ahead on the proposed date with conditions, or 3, to give the premises user a counter notice if it considered appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask you to now leave the room while we take legal advice and come to a decision? I will invite you back in and tell you that decision as soon as it's been made. As a council, I'm sure you encourage events in the city centre and encourage people taking enterprise and putting these events on. We have to bear in mind the safety of the people, and we want people to be safe and secure and have fun when attending these events. And in the absence of any assurance on the safety and in the absence of any engagement with people that could have helped with those arrangements, the only decision I'm afraid we could come to this morning is to refuse the application. So thank you everyone, and
Sorry, I'll just say for the benefit of the recording, and if indeed anybody else is watching, that the notice giver does have the right of appeal against the decision. So following the hearing, the licensing service will send out a counter notice, which is essentially to prevent the event from going ahead. So they do have the right of appeal against that, which would be within 21 days to the magistrate's court. As I understand it, the appeal would have to be commenced within those 3 weeks. How that works in terms of the event, I guess that's another issue, but there is that option available. But we'll send you a copy of the counter notice as well, should there be any issues over the next few weeks. But thank you all for coming and taking the time this morning. It's much appreciated. Thank you.